Greetings, everyone. Hi, I'm Rasheed. I'm the host of the Red Pill Diaries. I'd like to first, before we go live, thank each and every one of you for giving us another hour of your time and another day out of your busy lives. Thank you so much. It's very much appreciated. I also would like to ask you to subscribe, to like, and share the video. Before we go live, which will be going in just a few seconds, to my left or my right over here, which is your left, check out all of our social media platforms. Please remember to subscribe to those and go show your support. We hope to give you a powerful show. We thank you again for giving us the opportunity to come to you and give you unfiltered, unadulterated truth. Okay? Because we know in a time where lies prevail, truth is a rare, convenient, and truth is a rare commodity that we must use to get to the masses so that we can empower them with wealth, mental, spiritual, and emotional wealth. As the world that we know dies out, and as the governments that we know who rule the world try to enslave us mentally, spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, and economically. On that note, thank you again. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And also on all of our social media platforms here, go and do the same thing. We really appreciate it. Now, on to the fire. We're about to go live. Thank you so much.
I can't hear you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Oh, your mic is off. It says your microphone is off.
They keep doing.
No, your mic's off again.
Okay. I'm trying. There we are. They keep turning.
Right.
See, they keep turning me off. Matthew, yeah. I don't know what to say about this, man. No, it never stops, man. It never stops. They continue to take subscribers from it. They continue to mess with my microphone. They have delays in the speaking, and but we're gonna power through all of this, and we're gonna continue to keep pushing with the truth. Because what else can we expect when you speak in truth to power? They're gonna sabotage. They're gonna try to get people frustrated and move away. But how's it going with you today?
Oh, it's going very well, and you're absolutely right. We will persevere through all odds and obstructions. I'm just trying to find a better angle right now where the light, this disturbing light, is behind me, but I can't get rid. I can get rid of it. There we go. Yeah, all right, that kind of works. All right, yeah, I'm doing okay. It's good to be back.
Yeah. Now you know our subject today is overstepping.
Huh?
I couldn't hear you. You broke up for a second. Can you hear me
now? Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes. Our subject today is called overstepping red lines. And you know this has to do with Western intransigence and and imperial hubris. We know what's going on in Ukraine, and we know what's going on with the Asia Pacific. But I want to, before we get into all that, I want to visit Africa and the situation that is unfolding in Africa, because it doesn't get its just due, especially vis-a-vis the Ukrainian crisis. Now we see Gabon, we see Mali, we see Burkina Faso, we see Guinea, we see Niger. All of these nations are now bucking the trend, and they want to assert real economic, political, and national sovereignty.
Yes.
Why isn't it an uproar in the U.S. and in the West that, on one hand, they say that they respect Russia must respect Ukraine's territorial integrity, and on the other hand, they dismiss the will and the wishes of the people of those African nations who are saying France must go, the U.S. must go, Canada must go, NATO must go. Could you address that?
Yeah, I mean, I love the way you pose your questions, because it does bring out the clear hypocrisy and the disingenuity of the machinery of the hegemons, who really don't. They love virtue signaling, but they have no virtue, and it really comes clear. I mean, we saw this with the anniversary. It was the anniversary of 9/11. Just yesterday, we're broadcasting this on September 12th. And, the fact that of all of those who participated in the operation, and I just say participated on the outward form because there was a deeper core of what made this thing happen, but those operatives who were assigned to play the role of those who would carry out the hijacking were all Saudis, Saudi nationals, in some cases directly trained by the CIA, handled by the CIA. In many cases, directly tied to the Saudi embassy vis-a-vis Prince Bandar bin Sultan. We know this from the 28 pages that were declassified from the 9/11 Commission report. But despite that, we bombed Afghanistan and we bombed Iraq in response to 9/11. Both countries having had nothing to do with terrorism and the act of specifically 9/11. But those were who we bombed. And then we rewarded Saudi Arabia in those ensuing years with massive military contracts, oil deals, other things. And so, and when we attack nations through the UN Security Council or through even, we attack the human rights abuses of many countries, like Iran or something, because like many women are expected to wear headscarves, but they're also allowed to run for office. We leave Saudi Arabia. We had left Saudi Arabia alone for a long time, despite the fact that women just got the right to vote in municipal elections in 2015 and drive a car in 2020. But now, so you got like a double standard there, right? But you got them all over the place. And at the end of the day, the United States is working to promote separatism in Taiwan against China, against many countries of the world, while at the same time saying that those people who had a democratic election in Crimea or in East Donbass are terrorists who are not legitimate. Even though they actually had a real election versus like a regime change operation, which they were trying to do with the CIA and NED in so many governments to overthrow elected officials. So again, it's double standards all over the place. That's the nature of the game. But by bringing up Africa, I think that's a really great way to start. Partially because like we just had the G20, which was an interesting thing to follow. Ethiopia played a prominent role because Ethiopia is the capital of the African Union, and the African Union was inducted as a full member of the G20, which is a very good milestone. Ethiopia is also going to be made a full member of the BRICS, along with Egypt, downstream on the Nile in the north from Ethiopia, both of whom have been plagued by foreign agencies to be in hostility with each other, and specifically Egypt has been plagued to try to be very hostile to Ethiopia over the building of the Grand Renaissance Dam. But today's the Grand Renaissance Dam has just been finally completed. The final phase has been finished. The last reservoirs are full. It's now going to be producing full energy. The turbines are going to be working fully. This is 6,000 megawatts of electricity being generated not only for Ethiopia, but for the broader Horn of Africa, where there is a desperate need for energy. There's been a lot of work over many decades to sabotage the aspirations of modernization and industrialization from Africa. But now this is moving. And by the way, happy Ethiopian New Year. It's today is the Ethiopian New Year. So happy Ethiopian New Year. I think they're celebrating 2016. There's some weird stuff in the calendar. I don't really understand it. But it's just showcasing that you've got a new type of vision for Africa, which is tied to a multipolar reorientation that is much more geared towards honest investment, creating zones of stability. You have many puppets of Western corporations, specifically of French, but also of American corporations and military operatives who have been overthrown around most of sub-Saharan Africa. I mean, the just looking at the map of the countries in the last 2 years who have gone through military coups, it's quite astounding. Gabon just the most recent, but you had Niger, you had Mali, you had Faso, you had Ghana, there's another one I'm forgetting, I think Chad. And if you look at it, this is exactly the zone whereby the first leg or the first phase of the African transcontinental integrated railway system are going to be built. The east-west connection between Addis Ababa to or from Djibouti on the Red Sea to Addis Ababa, which has already been built with Chinese rail companies. There is a program endorsed by the African Union called Africa Agenda 2063, and the Intercontinental African Integrated Rail System, which involves some high-speed, a lot of electrified rail, is the first time that we've ever seen a full standardized rail grid for interconnectivity, but also creating new development corridors. And this is part of the Belt and Road Initiative. It is the BRI in Africa. That's what it is. And the final project will involve something like 46,000 kilometers of like free north-south rail line, going all the way up to Algeria on the Mediterranean, Morocco, Egypt. The port of Sayed is one of those ports that's heavily being built up with Russian investment as well as. You have some French rail companies helping build high-speed rail right now in Egypt that have already built about 1,000 kilometers in Morocco, connecting the Red Sea to the Mediterranean. But there's also UAE, Saudi investment. UAE is a big investor. Russia is also helping immensely with China on a variety of these projects. So you've got 3 north-south, and then you've got 6 east-west. One going from like in the south, like you've got one connecting the Indian Ocean to the Atlantic via Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Tanzania, which there's just been a recent two Africa-China summit. Just this week, one was at the end of August on that involved 50 representatives or high representatives of the African nations in China discussing the broader security partnerships that respect the UN Charter that are based on mutual development, win-win cooperation. And you had one also in Tanzania more recently that is also tied to advancing this leg of the transcontinental rail line. But that would also go up into Kenya, where you have the Mombasa-Nairobi rail line already built up by China that branch would connect up into, and there are already agreements signed between those two governments that would then create a more advanced development hub around that section below the Horn of Africa. And China has already helped broker deals between Kenya and Ethiopia to connect that even further up into Ethiopia to Addis Ababa, the capital of the African Union, and onward, upward into places like South Sudan, North Sudan, where China is signed a deal to upgrade something like 5,000 kilometers of decrepit colonial rail, which has fallen into disrepair over the years. Now China is going to modernize the rail in Sudan. If Sudan can be kept from falling into civil war, there's a lot of effort there to ensure that the process can occur. But that'll and also then onward up into Egypt, where there's current contracts negotiations to extend that rail system into Egypt and upward into the Mediterranean and to Southwest Asia. These are all contingent upon, one, avoiding falling into the trappings of Western arsonists who've been trying to create things like civil wars like between the Tigray People's Liberation Army in the north of Ethiopia, right?
Yeah.
Used as U.S. proxy for the time to stabilize Ethiopia, but that's been subdued. There's been actual negotiations so far. Hopefully that holds. Number two, the breakup of Sudan into two states, Christian-dominated and a Muslim-dominated north, with the south having all of the water, the majority of the water, the oil, the cultural potential, but still both being in abject poverty. That is the consequence of Susan Rice and her work with George Soros overseeing things like the 2009 Sudan and the blaming of President Bashir for all war crimes in Darfur. It's all apparently his fault, even though he's the one who largely put an end to the first wave of civil war instigated by the British and the Americans that went on from the 50s to 80s. But the idea was to use things like the International Criminal Court, the ICC, funded by George Soros, which is just a political instrument. This is the court that put a arrest warrant on Putin more recently, but they're the ones who arrest warrant on President Bashir gave legitimacy to carving up the balkanization of Sudan, which made it easier to induce to manipulate a civil war. So that's been kept at bay so far. Egypt also is dealing with its own destabilization, but the way to get out of this, and China understands this, the leadership of Ethiopia under Abiy Ahmed understands this, the Eritreans currently have a very good grasp of this, which is why they signed a peace deal with Abiy Ahmed. There was actually finally, and that's right above Djibouti, right next to Ethiopia on the Red Sea. The reason why is that they recognize finally that there's a policy that will create abundance. The way that to get out of these forever wars of divide and conquer is to create abundance. And by creating abundance, by building projects that will take 5, 10, 20 years, is that it creates a new climate where we begin to work with people who we thought were our enemies, but were actually our neighbors, who we have a common future living with, and their children. And so if you build projects that will increase electricity, desperately needed. I think there's something like over 550 million Africans living to this day with no electricity. Many of those, the worst cases, are in the areas that we see have been under the control of French and Western corporations, with abundance of uranium, of other energy systems that supply so much of France's nuclear power, but that get nothing in return, that still live with something like in Niger, it's like 2% of the people have electricity. That's absurd. In Gabon, they're similarly, it's something like, I forget, I had all my statistics, I can't memorize, but I mean, the rates of poverty are excruciating. So now with the Grand Renaissance Ethiopian Dam, you're going to create massive electricity abundance, but also a type of electricity which is going to be very, very useful for an industrial burst of modernization, which is also vitally important if countries are going to have real independence and sovereignty. It can't just be politically in name only, but rather economically. You've got to be able to shift. And then Sudan and Egypt, which have periodically been induced by Western manipulators to want to see the Grand Renaissance Dam of Ethiopia as a threat, because the story is that will reduce the water flows of the Nile into Sudan and into Africa. But if this dam produces only electricity, that water is not lost. That water is going to continue. It's just turning turbines. So there's actually no loss of water downstream. That's not happening. And they are now going to be able to fully demonstrate that. And they're going to create abundance to help and assist Sudan, who can now acquire more electricity for their needs. Egypt is also building dams, but more importantly, Egypt is also building, with the help of Russia, nuclear power. It's the first country of Africa outside of South Africa building 4 reactors of this kind of reactor complex built up with the help of Rosatom in Egypt, which once Egypt gets nuclear power, all of a sudden desalinating water from the Mediterranean and bringing it into natural reservoir systems within Egypt, is what Mubarak was already talking about back in 2006, 2007. He was already doing this while Gaddafi was already making big moves to tap into the fresh water under the Sahara. There's an immense amount of water under the Sahara, so much water, it's unimaginable. It was above the Sahara about 5,000 years ago, and we don't know what happened in our solar system that resulted in it going under, but now it's under the Sahara. Part of Gaddafi's grand design that made him a threat to NATO and a target for overthrow was the fact that he made the crime of employing a Montreal company, SNC-Lavalin, construction firm, to help tap into that water system and to clean a big chunk of the Sahara Desert of the north. So there's a variety of ways to create abundance. These are two of them. There will be more of them. And this is good. This is all very good.
Could you come back? Could you go out and come back in? Some of the stuff that it was muffled, just a little bit of it was muffled. I heard everything you said, but it was like an up and down muffled. And I believe they're doing to you what they just did to me at the beginning of the show or whatever. So, but yeah, I told a lot of my listeners that a lot of people focus on the gold dinar that Gaddafi was trying to implement with Africa, but another one of his sins was that he hired a Canadian company to help build aqueducts so that he can try to transform the Sahara into fertile land or whatever. And immediately on the completion of those aqueducts and stuff, it was one of NATO's first targets when they bombed Libya. And to me that is a humanitarian it's beyond criminal to bomb those aqueducts or whatever. But why do you think that, like, France? Well, I know, and you know, but we have to ask these questions for the people who are listening. Why do you think that France and all of the former colonial powers, including Canada, refuses to leave Africa, and they are taking resources, putting in people in power that are a detriment to the national security of their own nations, and they continue to do this, and at the same time, ad nauseum, they talk about human rights, self-determination, democracy, freedom, and territorial integrity and national sovereignty.
Yeah, I mean, your question can't be repeated enough, and I'm sorry if I'm using my phone for the first time for this type of StreamYard. I've never done this. Actually, if you want to send me a link to StreamYard by my email, then I could jump in on my computer and try it that way. Maybe the sound is going to be better. But is the sound okay right now?
Okay. Yes, the sound is okay now.
Oh, okay. All right.
It's okay right now.
Yeah, your question can't be overstated. I mean, you know, there's 15,000 troops in Mali, French troops in Mali. You know, like the level of colonial controls on military and economic domains is so underappreciated by most Western audiences. There's 12,000 soldiers in Niger, or that's what there were. The biggest American military drone base. There's 6 U.S. military drone bases in Niger. One of them is the world's biggest drone base. That was part of the counterterrorism operation against the terrorists in Mali, but also in Libya, and none of it worked. You know, that was one of the points that the new military regimes that overthrew those governments made the point. They're like, look, you've been there with all of your troops. You put billions of dollars of resources into counterterrorism, essentially occupying these countries, and yet the Boko Haram, the Al Qaeda, the branch of Al Qaeda in Mali, has only increased in power and in influence. You know, the greatest spikes of terrorist-related death have occurred. I think it's been a 60% spike since last year in sub-Saharan Africa. Terrorism in Libya has increased everywhere. The Libyan Shield, Libyan Islamic Fighting Group, the other Libyan branches of Al Qaeda have increased, despite the fact that all of this U.S. and French military and Canadian military present. So what's really going on? Is it possible that these military agencies are actually assisting in the growth of terrorists? And it seems that that's the case. And you know, for those of us who have put a little bit of effort into looking at the real story of 9/11, we could see that clearly, or even earlier, right? Like what allowed Al Qaeda to even exist in the first place? Well, that was the CIA's Operation Cyclone. That was Zbigniew Brzezinski. That was the Trilateral Commission. They're the ones who created Al Qaeda by radicalizing a bunch of young Islamic men living in poverty in Afghanistan and beyond, in Pakistan, and even into China and West China. Xinjiang, a lot of Muslims there were radicalized with the help of at the time certain Pakistani dictators and Saudi operatives to fall into radicalizing madrasas with a particular Salafist spin on Islam that really charged them up and weaponized them become useful tools in a proxy war against Russia. That's what Afghanistan was always all about. And I remember when Zbigniew Brzezinski was asked in '97 in an interview from French magazine, do you regret having funded these madrasas that created then Al Qaeda that resulted in the murder or the deaths of all of these innocents? Was it worth it? And he said, absolutely, it was worth it. It was the greatest thing I've ever done. He saw that because he understood that that was the biggest thing that led to the destruction of the Soviet Union, which was always his number one goal. So he saw that as his greatest accomplishment. He took pride in it. And this operation was there and available for providing a good cover story for the 9/11 operation itself. That was an inside job where something within the U.S. regime at the time murdered its own people with the help of certain cover stories as well, certain operatives who were brought into play in the war. It was really a war game scenario, right? Of 9/11, that involved certain disposable Saudi operatives that would then absorb the blame for those who were thinking outside of the lone guy in a cave who hates our freedom story. That was the big narrative, kind of like Lee Harvey Oswald is a lone gunman who just is crazy. That was the big narrative of the Ellen Dulles Warren Commission. But for those who would think outside the box and not accept the big story, the big narrative, there were little narratives to capture them. That, it was a Saudi conspiracy run because the Saudis hate our freedom. And so that was then supplied for them. Just like, Lee Harvey Oswald was in Russia. He was assigned to go to Russia for a period before he was brought back to America to be a part of the JFK murder. Not that he ever was. I'm not even saying Lee Harvey Oswald was that. But the story, it was a pre-planned red herring, a story that would then be crafted for those who didn't agree with the simplistic narrative of lone gunmen to say, it was a Kremlin conspiracy to use their Manchurian candidates to murder our president. And that was then cooked up and it satisfied by things like the John Birch Society and other organizations like that were pouring fuel onto the flames of anti-communism with McCarthy and with J. Edgar Hoover and with Allen Dulles behind the scenes, making sure that nobody was looking at what was the actual foreign agency that had taken control of the United States over the course of the murder of Lincoln, right? Who was standing up against the foreign-directed deep state operation of fifth columnists in America itself, organized through Wall Street, through the Freemasonic lodges that had taken over with the Southern Rite of Freemasonry. That people like Albert Pike, who founded the KKK later on and also became one of the godfathers of the modern Scottish Rite Freemasonic sect of the cultic, taking control of U.S. intelligence on behalf, as he was. What was Albert Pike? The guy was a Confederate general, right? In dialogue with Giuseppe Mazzini, one of the key architects of the First International in in Europe, and also one of the key architects of the Young Europe movement of anarchists that would then be deployed to destabilize governments around localized myths of the grandeur of the young Albanian movement, the young German movement, the young Turks came out of it. These were all run by McKinney and specifically Lord Palmerston, who was always very closely aligned with Giuseppe McKinney. These guys are celebrated today, or McKinney is celebrated as being this great anti-imperial Republican hero. He was actually one of the forefathers who was celebrated by Mussolini as one of the key progenitors of a new global fascist European state under a technocratic elite of masterclass troops. And this is the guy who was handling the local priest in America, Albert Pike. right? Who still had a statue in Washington, D.C. up until not that long ago as a great hero of America. So this, I mean, this is like the statue was taken down like what, last year? You know, like you got this thing in America that's connected to the murder of JFK that people could have looked at and better understood, but instead they were told, no, the foreign conspiracy that you're seeing, that you know is real, is actually Beijing. It's the godless commie Chinese, the godless commie Kremlin. That's who it is. And that was the narrative of the Cold War that gave us a new enemy image to rally around in fear and hate, while the real agents, foreign agencies that wanted to kill us, were in the midst of killing presidents like Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Fred Hampton, Bobby Kennedy. They were the ones taking control under the Trilateral Commission of David Rockefeller and Henry Kissinger, right? Of Brzezinski, who were then also funding a new type of enemy image in the form of radical Islam, but first calling them freedom fighters and heroes, fighting the big bad Soviet godless commies during the 80s, and then later on being relabeled something different that was more convenient to their political desires. And this totally affected Africa too, you know, like they were killing, you know, Patrice Lumumba, all of the greatest Pan-African leaders who were being either killed or overthrown. Like, I mean, Kwame Nkrumah, who was a friend of America. The guy studied in the United States in the 1930s and 40s and was trying to study as an engineer. How was it that America was able to, or he wasn't an engineer, but he was studying the engineering work of the Tennessee Valley Authority. How was America able to take these racist backwater areas of the former Confederate South and transform them into hydroelectric industrial powerhouses with aerospace science at the cutting edge of these areas of Tennessee, of Texas, of all of these zones, right? That was what Franklin Roosevelt was able to accomplish by bringing back Abraham Lincoln's economic program for national development under the idea of American system protectionism, American system large-scale credit emissions for big projects that would increase national power and intellect. So that's what Kwame Nkrumah studied when he was thinking, how can we bring these lessons back to Africa, where we have very similar problems. And that was the basis of the first generation Pan-African movement, that many of these leaders, again, Haile Selassie of Ethiopia, was again friends with JFK, or at least the entire like JFK Patriot network. And it was the American engineers brought in from the JFK had a program called the Peace Corps. So how do you retool what could be otherwise a military process into something that would be tied to a peaceful development process? And a lot of young people were given the opportunity to go and travel to help build canals, build wells, help build schools in poor countries under the Peace Corps. And so many of these engineers were even brought in on the invitation of Haile Selassie to Ethiopia to chart out how to harness the water flows of what became today the Grand Renaissance Dam. The first feasibility studies were done by American engineers in the 60s, working together with Haile Selassie, which it took like another 60 years to finally do it, but they did it. And the same thing for Ghana, right? Like the Volta River Dam, the Volta River Dam is it up until now it was the biggest dam ever built on the continent of Africa in Ghana. And if you look at it, well, who built that? It was done with JFK and his allies, the patriotic American industrialists who were always in opposition. Kaiser Steel, right? These were the good industrialists of the 60s who took pride in building up America and were the enemies of the J.P. Morgan United Steel Complex. They were the ones who went there and built the Volta River Dam and helped train engineers in Ghana to do it. And to this very day, there's a plaque in Ghana at the base of the Volta River Dam that I think it's called the Akosombo Dam, I forget, but in honor of John F. Kennedy. It's still there to this very day. So people have forgotten that what America once was. And instead, you know, this entity that wanted to work with the British, with the French, with other imperialists, wanted to turn America into an empire. The thing that it was created in 1776 to resist. America was supposed to be the world's first anti-imperial nation, designed for the liberty of its people, but also the consent of the governed and people of all the world. That was the mandate of America that was never fulfilled. because you always had this foreign agency of traders working to bring it back under the imperial fold by corrupting it from within, if it couldn't be destroyed from the outside. So this is what killed JFK, it killed his brother. Bobby Kennedy had a program to also assist in economic justice for Africa by bringing back his brother's program. He was in close collaboration with people like Martin Luther King Jr., who was murdered just a few months before he was murdered. But they had Martin Luther King Jr. Began a whole program of moving first towards a criticism of the war in Vietnam in '67, but then expanding it towards the broader criticism of imperialism and economic injustice more broadly in the last months of his life, as he was, So these were the things that were snuffed out in America at the same time that those who killed these guys then put their efforts into overthrowing Kwame Nkrumah, which was a CIA-run operation to overthrow Nkrumah in Ghana, and then to do what they did by turning American economic influence into economic terrorism through the IMF, the World Bank, that would then ensure that loans would only be granted to the degree that conditionalities were satisfied that involved turning these countries into debt slaves, right? Under structural readjustments, crap like that. So we're now at a place where there's really a reckoning finally happening, and because the torch of John F. Kennedy has been picked up by nations leading the BRICS, especially China, but also Russia, but on the economic level, especially China, there's really a hope now to revive what was derailed back in the 60s, and I'm hoping that this continues on in the direction that we're seeing.
So, do you ever think that the French, the Italians, just put it like this, the Americans and the colonial nations would ever willfully and willingly give up what they see as their proper possessions, which are the former colonies in Africa and Latin America? Not just Africa, because America and the British and a lot of these, they still have colonies in Latin America also, like the Malvinas Islands and all of these things. They're thousands of miles away, and yet they're claiming these territories to their own, just like what's going on in an African it's an African island, an island off the coast of Africa. France has claimed it as its own. It's nowhere near Europe, and it says that it is a vital part of the European continent, even as they are brutalizing and victimizing the citizens and the original inhabitants of that island. Do you think that they would ever willfully and willingly give up the prey?
Well, here's the interesting thing. In short, no, I don't. Same thing, like the U.S. has like an island called Guam, right in the middle of like the Pacific, right in Asia, right? Like, why do you have Guam? Britain still has like an island right off the coast of like Argentina. It's like, why do you have these? Now, there's an interesting contradiction, or there's a buildup of contradictions within the imperial system right now, which required a certain amount of like collaboration amongst the, like there's different vested interests within the imperial elite of France and Germany. Well, Germany's been much more, we know what happened in Germany after World War II. They're more of like an American military base and a military colony than an actual sovereign country. But there's all sorts of different common interests amongst the various elites of the transatlantic domain who have their vision for common interest to exploitation of a poor class. But it's not exactly the same vision, like in terms of like what their role will be and what their interests will be and possessions within the so-called New World Order that's been like built up over many decades of careful planning and effort. There's been this like broader idealized vision, right? You got to put your mindset into the mind of a grand strategist who believes that they're going to be benefiting at the top of the chain of command in a global system of control, of stasis, of depopulation, under an unelected priesthood of a new world order, right? That's sort of like the ultimate goal, is to get to this idealized, this evil platonic idealized utopia of perfect stability, perfect stasis, perfect obedience by the masses to an elite. Now, I say Plato. I said Platonic idea. I meant in the perverse sense of the term. I'm also a Platonist. I love Plato, but there's an evil, a misuse of ideal. If for example, if you don't have love for your fellow man, if love is not in your heart and your conscience has been crushed, then you will be in the realm of abstract cold power. That's the world you think you live in, Hobbesian cold power, with only those who have the power to overcome their conscience and destroy moral value, who are the most fit, hey, in that Darwinian chain of command to be at the top of the picking order. So there's faction fights. I think the French have come to recognize, with other members of the European elite, that they're a little bit more disposable than they thought they were. They're not as essential as they thought they were, and we see that with the conscious breakdown of energy systems. Like a lot of it wasn't Macron, who I think is him, if left to his own devices, is a much more controlled, useful idiot who's working on behalf of the French branch of the Rothschild, of the more inner sanctum of the oligarchy, who really don't want money. At the end of the day, they want to use their economic power to enforce population control at the end of the day and get rid of nation states. That's really what they want. They will use money to do that, but then you have the industrial class who wields influence. And when Macron was forced to go to China, to Beijing, and there was the red carpet just a few months ago rolled out for Macron, it wasn't his initiative. He was brought by the collar by the French business class, who recognizes that they're all being thrown under the bus and sabotaged by this geopolitical Anglo-American scheme that involves shutting down the industrial base of Europe, cutting off Europe from any economic activity with China and with Russia, especially the energy resources. A lot of the German industrial class was very angry, that they're being shut down and sabotaged. The German people, the French people, are going to be more in a motion to revolt in anarchy. That's not necessarily good for the security of the elite, who don't like having cases of mass riot when there's not enough food or affordable energy to go around. The business class is being wiped out. So Emmanuel Macron was forced to go to China and start trying to build bridges. He was also, I think we talked about this the last time I was on your program. He was also kind of begging to be invited into the last BRICS summit in South Africa. They didn't let him, and they should. I think they did the right thing. But it's interesting. It's interesting because I think that the business community is a bit of a wild card right now. Their interest is they're recognizing that they're ultimately crushable under the Great Reset, and the Great Reset involves, like Mark Carney, the high priest of central banking, has made the point, for any business that rewires its agenda and its value towards the green ethos of anti-carbonization, decarbonization, you will be rewarded in the new system. And for those who fail to make that transition and hold on to the old values that you thought you had, you will be wiped out. So a big chunk of these companies, like SNC-Lavalin, the Canadian firm, was a company that builds things in the real world. Did they behave badly over the last 50 years? Yeah, they've done bribes. They've done all sorts of they've hobnobbed with the mafia, getting contracts for construction projects. But do they actually want to build things? Yeah, they also want that too. And so they were happy to work with Gaddafi to help build the Great Man-Made Water Project. The French companies, Arriva, and look at some of the French rail companies. They want to build high-speed rail. They're happy to build high-speed rail in Morocco or in Egypt. They want to. They want contracts. They want to have a reason to exist. Because if they would just step in the futureless domain of Europe as their playground, there's no future. There's nothing being built. The idea is to only allow things that are Green New Deal to be built, like windmills and solar panels. That's permitted, but nothing else. Sorry, I got somebody at the door. Can you get the door?
Okay, that's cool.
Yep. That's cool. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, sorry. So yeah, all that to say, no, they would never willingly give up their imperial possessions, but at the same time, they might be forced if they want to survive to play by a new set of rules of the game over time. So that's something.
But before we transition to the SMO in Ukraine, I want to revisit something that you talked about at the beginning of the show. And you said we talked about how there was an African China summit, but we didn't tell them that it was right on the heels of the BRICS summit. And could this have been an impetus for the G20 to finally admit the African Union into the G20? Because for so many years there had been resistance to the G20 admitting the African Union into as a full-fledged member of the G20. Is this a concession of the West to try to prevent the African Union from seeking membership in the BRICS or furthering its integration into the BRI? What do you think about this matter?
Yeah, I think that there's a certain game being played by the West to there's this old saying, if you can't beat them, join them. Now, in this case, they're not really joining. It would be the most rational thing if the West, ironically, wanted to really survive the oncoming storm that they created for themselves. Then they should actually eat some humble pie and join with China and the Belt and Road Initiative. They should join to help build things that are real, that have a lot of momentum. And China is an economic powerhouse. They're the only country that has demonstrated a real power of building long-term projects that are giant, mega in scale, that reach outside of the limits of growth to the emission. Also, they have the instruments of national banks that are highly regulated, so you can't just speculate with non-existent methods. So we could work with that process, learn from it, start building up what we destroyed in our physical economy with China that would be more than happy to work with us, with Russia. Donald Trump was making a lot of moves in that direction while he was president that people were not paying attention to, which is also I think, the reason why they're afraid and why there's political persecution against Trump right now, to ensure that these types of ideas of economic cooperation with Russia, China, and the United States are not revived. There would be a Nord Stream 2 pipeline, for example. That would have been finished already easily. And there would be, as the former Ukrainian ambassador from the United States said to NBC not that long ago, had Trump been still in office, there would be no Ukraine war right now, because he would have given so many concessions to Putin that it would have made this war impossible. But she also said, the psychopathic crazy bitch that she is, that's why it's such a good thing that Trump is out. Says the people who seem to care about Ukrainian democracy. So all that to say, there is a nefarious agenda to try to use the surface appearance of what makes the BRI a success, like what we, and to try to win back to the fold of the New World Order certain countries that are believed to be still that could play on our side. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, are two countries who recently made their commitment to join the BRICS very well known. They were accepted along with Ethiopia, Egypt as well. So one thing that they're trying to do is they're trying to say, okay, well, look, let's create a space. I know we're sorry. We didn't let you develop manufacturing in the Gulf states for decades and decades. We didn't let you, but now we'll change. We promise. We'll do it. As long as Saudi Arabia, you get on board with UAE, you help us build a U.S.-managed corridor from India into Europe as the sort of like a new version of the new Silk Road, and with rail corridors and we'll have Jordan and Israel will play into that. We'll try to make certain promises also to Ethiopia that they can maybe do this. So there's a genuine desire to act like they've changed. It's kind of like the husband who keeps on beating his wife and keeps on promising her, like, I've changed, and come back into the fold. And the stupidest thing would be if Saudi Arabia and UAE and others actually go back into the house after all of the decades of being, of used and kept undone. India as well, like there's a lot of effort right now to try to cope India and inflame a sort of sense of Indian pride, but based upon an idea of getting India to sign onto military West in opposition to China and Pakistan. Now that there are Western operatives who are part of thinking those terms. They're very broad people, and some of them have political clout, and so they're trying to get India to be part of this specific NATO operation. They've already signed deals with India on military cooperation with America that have military in India. Do I think that Modi represents that action? I don't think in as far as person does, nor does the minister. He's a smart guy. They're trying to get benefits from both sides of the aisle while trying to navigate through the demands of political power brokers who have a lot of money and influence for crazy within India to expect things out of them that in the hands of the imperialists. But India doesn't have the capability. Like, who's going to pay for the giant corridor? At the end of the day, I understand how China has been able to pay for its Belt and Road Initiative and its other investments across Africa. 38% of the Belt and Road Initiatives outside of China are in sub-Saharan Africa. It's the biggest growth zone of BRI connected investment in the world. The rail line connecting Djibouti all the way to Dakar in Senegal is underway. Like, I mean, that's part of the Africa Agenda 2062, the full endorsement of China that's now coming on a new power with the African Union, the African Trade Continental Trade Agreement, finalized now for the first time ever to allow intercontinental trade amongst the states. That never has been permitted, along with standardizing the rail system, but never been permitted under the days of dividing the conquered empire. And again, if it were not for China and for Russia on a military security and intelligence level, I really don't think that they would have been able to make it this far. I don't think it would have happened. So the U.S. doesn't have it. They've tried to do anti-nuclear program for the past several years. They tried the Global Green Gateway, unveiled by Biden and Evelyn. They tried to build back better for the world program. They tried the Osawog plan of creating like a corridor of green, solar panels from India to the Middle East to North Africa. That was originally promoted under Desert Pact back in 2010. And then revived again more recently. None of these things work because they don't have their economic basket cases based on creating debt that can't be paid for and speculation that can't build anything, including inside of America itself. So it seems to me like it's a bit of it's an attempt at the G20 to try to act sane without any of the substance to act sane. It's not very believable.
Okay. We have David Moss says, anyone else audio is a little choppy. He was saying that, and someone was saying that your audio was a little choppy. I sent you the link to your email also, just in case you wanted to jump.
Let me get off. Just let me get on in 2 seconds, all right?
Okay. So everybody, be patient. He'll be right back in. He's setting it up, and he'll be right back through. Thank you all for your comments and everything. Now, while we're waiting for him, let's just chop up a few things. I was thinking about a whole bunch of things that were going on, and sometimes I just lie down and I think about the comments. Oh, there he is in the booth. Let me bring him in real quick. Let's see.
All right.
Come on, stream, y'all. All right, there we are. All right.
Oh,
so, Matt, I want to Real Truth Talk. My guy, Real Truth Talk. Shout out to him and everybody. Go subscribe to Real Truth Talk. Go over there, even if you're just over there for a second. Go visit every one of the videos. Hit the like button. Everything. He's a real solid guy. Real Truth Talk asked the question: does Matt think this SMO will be? This is my daughter. She's coming in to give Dad a hug. So you guys got to excuse me. Does Matt think this SMO will be over soon, or is this the beginning? Matt, you have that. While you're doing that, I'm going to blurt my black my screen, give my daughter a hug, and I'll be listening while you talk on it.
All right. Well, unfortunately, this one is not something I feel too comfortable speaking about. I tend to reserve, like to relegate that type of analysis over to those who are more experts in the field of Ukraine and that type of military tactical politics and grand strategy, like Scott Ritter and McGregor and Larry Johnson's pretty good. Joaquin Flores is great. If anybody's not subscribed to the Telegram channel run by Joaquin Flores, it's called New Resistance. So it's t.me/New Resistance. Very good Telegram channel. You know, I don't know exactly what the deal is at this stage of the SMO. Definitely, there's only so many young men who can be like murdered in the meat grinder from Ukraine. I did see an analysis by I forgot the name of this analyst who said something interesting about his hypothesis regarding the strategy behind the continuously failed operation to counter to go on an offensive that never works out. I mean, Ukraine's getting destroyed. They've got the biggest military gravesite in the world that Anthony Blinken toured last week. It's super sad and pathetic. But this analyst was saying something. I don't know what your thoughts are on this, Rasheed, but he was saying that there has been a back channel promise to Poland, and there's a certain Polish-Lithuanian sort of romanticism to revive the old Polish-Lithuanian Empire, to expand the territory and take back Galicia in West Ukraine, northwest Ukraine, and that the promise to give up a big chunk of Western Ukraine to Poland is part of the agenda to kill off a big chunk, as many young men in Ukraine as possible, in order to have nobody there to resist and to fight back against Poland, who has been promised a sort of jurisdiction in the New World Order that involves a much more carved up Ukraine. I think it's all insane. The plan, if that's true, it's still crazy. But what do you think of that hypothesis?
Well, I thought about that very deep, and I came to the conclusion that I listened to what the Belarusian officials say and the Russian officials said. And at one time, Putin was open to Poland taking back part of Ukraine as to get rid of their headache. But then after a while, the Belarusian president stated that any involvement of Poland in any part of Ukraine would be an existential threat to not only Belarus, but the Union state, and that it would be unacceptable, and then Belarus would enter the fray. So Zelensky and the Western neocons might have that. And think about all of the things that come with that. Even if Poland goes in and claims part of Lviv or Lvov or whichever way they said, think about, you have Lithuania, you have Hungary have claims, then you have Germany, which has claims on part of Poland. So now the cat is out the bag, and you have unleashed so many things that now you can't put back. The genie is out the bottle. You can't put it back now. And now you have allies fighting over territorial disputes that were decades ago supposedly solved. So if that is the case, then you would see I think that NATO would quickly spin out of control and break up, because like Germany, they would say, well, why? They would tell the West, well, why would you respect their calls for reclaiming part of this territory and not respect our claims for reclaiming part of Poland, which was ours? And then you have Hungary would say the same thing, because there's a large Hungarian population in Ukraine, and part of Ukraine was once part of Hungary. So now you've let that geopolitical cat out the bag, and I think it would devastate NATO. And I don't think America, with its bribes and threats and because it's a waning power, I don't think when Humpty Dumpty falls off that wall, I don't think the imperial power will have the gorilla glue to put it back together again. I don't think so. I think it would spiral out of control.
Well said. No, I appreciate that. I fully endorse what you just said. No, it's a great point. And at the end of the day, it's true. It's like,
So,
as soon as you create these new standards of behavior, you're gonna, like you said, you're gonna unleash the beast. And at that point, NATO is already infighting and consuming itself from. I mean, the whole Euro system was designed in a certain sense with this fatal flaw of trying to treat everybody in every nation as if they're all equal, which was never true. Every nation has their own economic pros and cons and their own aptitudes and attributes and cultural dynamics. So to try to impose some mathematical equilibrium onto everybody that would then all be using the same euro as if all of the European nations were somehow equal was always designed to fail, whereby you would create animosity and infighting and all sorts of things that create more volatility. And certain, other nations call other groupings pigs, like the Portugal, Ireland, Greece, Spain grouping of highly indebted countries. They're highly indebted because their Goldman Sachs and other Western bankers and Rothschild bankers oversaw their portfolios as they went into the Eurozone to be tied towards speculation on biofuels or on real estate. And so, of course, it was designed to be an illusory burst of profit that was always going to burst, as all bubbles do, resulting in a massive amount of economic chaos. And then they would be subjected to all sorts of austerity. And then, Germany, which has a big economic power. It's one of the only ones with France that has some economic productive industrial capability left within her, would of course feel a lot of resentment because now they're making sacrifices in Germany over like the bailouts that were given to Greece or to Spain or to Portugal over their economic irresponsibility. And everybody hates everybody, right? It's cutthroat. It's NATO as well, right? Like Hungary that isn't on board with going on with the NATO agenda. Turkey's not on board. Serbia's not a member, but I mean they're part of the Euro, and it's just there's so much infighting. And yet they need to convey this image. It's all about narratives and illusions, right? And creating the illusion that we're all in this together. We are the rules-based democratic order of the free world. We have total harmony of action. It's like, nah, dude, these are just words. They're meaningless. You can't get anything done, and whatever you try to do, it blows up in your face because you're incompetent. At the end of the day, that's really the problem.
For all their values, their value talk and democracy, well, what is her name? Ursula von der Leyen. She was never elected. She was appointed, and she's and so these people in the European Union, they continue to talk about democracy and stuff. Let me advance something to you. When it comes to the European Union and the United States, they continue to escalate and pass every red line. If you notice, every time they say that they would not do this because it may escalate things, within weeks or months later, when all of their other plans fail, then they publicly announce that they may do X, Y, and Z. The very thing that they say may cause things to spiral out of control, from the tanks to the ATACMS to the drones to everything else. And now we're at the depleted uranium shells rounds there. Now, Russia had already said that they would treat this as a weapon of mass destruction. And yet the United States continues to do this. And on top of that, we have Britain, the United States, Romania, and a few other nations are now talking about having a war games in the Black Sea, close to the war zone, close to the Odessa area, where Russia has said that any civilian or military ship entering the Odessa port without Russia's approval will be deemed an enemy combatant, and then they would use all power to stop that. And you have Britain deploying warplanes over there saying to escort ships to the Odessa port. If this is not madness, and what it is more than anything, it is showing you that the West have become spoiled brats. As long as they could get their way and can dominate and force people to capitulate to them, everything was okay. But now that they are losing at every end, it's like a spoiled kid. A spoiled kid, when he can't get his way, he starts screaming and throwing a tantrum. And this is what is going on. And this tantrum may lead to thermonuclear war. You know, what
Yeah.
have you to say on
Anyway,
this situation? Because nobody's talking about this.
yeah, Safeguard Defender. Yeah, like you got the biggest. They say the biggest military war game exercise going on with NATO since the Cold War. With the scenarios of a Russian invasion of Europe. Like that's actually the scenario that they're openly running with. Is now Russia has invaded Europe. This is what we're going to war game out now with like 45,000 troops. It's crazy on the Black Sea in a zone, which is like the hot spot, which, like you said, they're tempting fate right now. It is insanity. It's Dr. Strangelove times 10. I'm befuddled. I'm befuddled by the level. I didn't think that this level of incompetence and arrogance would be as harsh as it was. If you were to ask me 5 years ago, would they do things like I don't think I would have necessarily thought that they would. But here we are. I do think that Russia has demonstrated an immense amount of poise. I don't think they would fall for traps that would lead to a quick escalation of nuclear war. But the problem is Russia doesn't use computer models, like game theory computer models, to come up with their economic or military strategies, whereas the West has been now in a 60 or 70-year practice of allowing computer programmers managing game theory models out of things like RAND, the RAND Corporation, to generate scenarios premised around probabilistic theory with choice selected variables as inputs, which would, the programmers would select which data sets go into the computer program that generate the outcomes that they want to have. And upon what standard are you judging what data goes into your scenario regarding what are you programming into the assumptions of what is motivating your so-called enemy of Russia or China or anything else? You're presuming all sorts of things that you're doing Freudian projection onto that. You're like, yeah, you're assuming that Russia and China want to dominate the world and kill you. They may not want to do that. You're assuming that they do everything for self-interest on a material level, and will screw over any allies that they have based on material considerations. They may not do that. They may be thinking on a more mature level than you, because that's how you think. You think that everybody thinks that way, but then they wire the whole war game around these models. They run the scenarios, and then based on the scenarios, they give them the best probability of victory, which includes limited nuclear war scenarios. Rand Corps has made a career for itself throughout the 50s and 60s in generating military white papers and scenarios on how do you win a limited thermonuclear war with limited collateral damage of like maybe 20-30% of the world population. Maybe we'll allow for the wiping out of a big chunk of Northern Europe or Eastern Europe, but or our allies in Japan or Korea might get wiped out. But overall, we still come out winning. Or a big chunk of American cities. Maybe we lose 50-60% of the American cities. But overall, we come out winning because we destroyed 100% of China and Russia in our computer models. It's not. It doesn't work that way. Reality is very different. There's higher considerations that they're not able to think about. But it does make it more dangerous because they become so inflexible based on their religious belief that their computer model is reality and has given them like a crystal ball, kind of like almost like the oracles of ancient Rome that would like they called them augurs that would like read the tea leaves or the bird guts. It would spill out and they would read the bird guts that would then give the emperor advice or the general's advice on like how to go to war, how to perform, on who do you make an alliance with in this war against the Visigoths or Ostrogoths. That's how decisions were made back in the days of the Roman Empire. That's why the Roman Empire went crazy and couldn't maintain itself and ended up collapsing under the weight of its own corruption and folly because they believed in the superstitious garbage that animated their real world policies. So that's the same sort of thing. I mean, for Christ's sakes, like a lot of the high level military officials have been processed. We no longer have the type of military thinking that we once had in the days of World War II or before that, where we once had a tradition of doing things for duty, honor, defense only. Right? There was the idea that this is the idea of the American tradition of Cincinnatus that went back to the Roman Republic with the farmer Cincinnatus, who was called forth because he had skills as a soldier to defend Rome at a time of crisis before it was an empire, to take up arms, to become a leading general, which he successfully did. He had basically the power of an emperor at his disposal because he needed to save the republic. And after he successfully did his job creatively, he willfully gave back the power to the Senate and went back and picked up the plow. And that became like sort of a really good patriotic ideal for what the military should be, and this is what Eisenhower, for all of the guy's problems, he at least had an element of that still, where he had the what's called the plowshares, the swords to plowshare program, that would be based on the idea of converting your military destructive power into a productive power that could build as much as they could destroy. Because America used to have an engineering army in World War II. The soldiers of the army had special training to be able to build bridges. So you could put them to work in peacetime to construct things. A lot of these soldiers were used during the Marshall Plan to rebuild Europe at a fantastic speed. That's what John F. Kennedy was tapping back into, what trained the youth generation of those who were like coming out of high school to become part of the Peace Corps and build real world things. They were being trained by people of military veterans, right? How did these military veterans have that skill? They weren't part of some like Spartan mercenary force of professional killers. That came in with, again, I spoke about Zbigniew Brzezinski. Well, Trilateral Commission, Samuel P. Huntington was a close ally, was part of the Trilateral Task Force on reorganizing America's military systems. That's what he designed. The book Soldier in the State. It was based on purging America of its old traditions of the soldiers, the citizen soldier, and creating a new Spartan modeled or Roman Empire modeled soldier class or professional soldier class of mercenaries that would be just obedient, would not think. They would be grunts. They would just obey chain of command. They wouldn't do any thinking, and it wouldn't be expected of them. It was more like the British chain of command style, where nobody is allowed. It's very compartmentalized, right? All the way up, and only the person who's far separated and far removed from the battle, sitting in some fluffy office in London, or in this case in Washington, has the power to make decisions about what people do when they go in like World War One. That's why World War One was such a bloodbath. Go. That's the Battle of Gallipoli. What was the Battle of Gallipoli? It was Churchill overseeing this insane battle in Turkey that involved an unwinnable attack of just taking your young men, throwing them into the machine guns, and then doing it again and doing it again and doing it again with no end or strategy in a terrain that Churchill didn't understand, because he was just looking at maps on a wall. He had no idea what the terrain was. He had no idea of anything else, but everybody had to obey. And if you didn't, you got shot. You're being a traitor, right? And that's what they wanted to bring in increasingly into the U.S. reform of the military, and a lot of this required an indoctrination of an elite new age cult that was processed. There's that movie Men Who Stare at Goats. You've seen that movie?
Oh yeah.
That was based on a true story of Fort Bragg.
I want to.
And yeah.
Well,
yeah, that was a true story of Fort Bragg, and that. Oh yeah, sure. Okay.
Go ahead.
I was going to say
there's a delay. I don't know what StreamYard is doing now, but there's a delay.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll take that into consideration. But just quick, what the movie and the book that the movie is based on, it's a George Clooney movie, but it's actually based on true events that occurred in the late 70s in Fort Bragg around the 1st Earth Battalion. And the actual figure of Colonel Shannon, who created the 1st Earth Battalion, and Colonel John Alexander, who was the overseer of this reform of the military, these were all people who were part of the human potential movement. They went through the psychedelic trips of the Esalen Institute. They went through transcendental meditation. They went through training in New Age quantum dynamic, quantum physics theology that was all based on this new type of synthetic culture that
would train people who would become spiritually very flaky with the assistance also of, again, like I said, psychedelics, other things that would trip them out, to become convinced that you could align your particles. If you're a super soldier with super discipline, you could align your particles with a wall and run through the wall, and or stare at a goat to the point that you can make the goat's heart explode and you kill the goat. And you can do psychic projections to have battle planes on the astral plane and so they started putting Pentagon money into creating psychic soldiers with psychic departments and paranormal military departments. And Colonel John Alexander was a key figure in overseeing this whole reform in Fort Bragg. And he was part of the 4th Psychological Operations Unit. A lot of these guys were processed in the Vietnam War, where they were really broken, made crazy. He worked with people at Fort Bragg like Major Michael Aquino and Colonel Vallely, who wrote Mind Wars on how to make the new domain of warfare based upon targeting the minds of the people. And of course, using electromagnetic material, but also using psychic material, other things. And Major Aquino was the head of the Church of Satan. He was Anton LaVey's second in command, and he created and founded the Church of Set. He was at the center of a major pedophilia network on Fort Bragg at the daycare centers, and had a whole like ritual human sacrifice thing. And he's still there. And John Alexander, the guy who oversaw this, is still a figure who is working with the heads of like NORAD. These are the creatures that oversaw, 9/11. The reason why 9/11 was successful is because NORAD shut down their entire continental defenses for that morning that 9/11 occurred. These are the crazy frigging psychopaths into a new age psychedelic drug cult, brought into the military, advised and oversaw Desert Storm. You're like, how could the military do such crazy shit? Unwinnable, insane, self-destructive things like Desert Storm, like earlier Vietnam, especially 9/11. How could they be as stupid as we see them being, believing that these computer models are reality, and then doing everything to try to hold on to that fiction? It's because they've been turned. Our military top brass has been turned into a hyper hardcore cult with some occultic proclivities too. Like this is part of this whole operation too, is turning people into a little bit of a pedophilia-oriented black magic thing. This is part, and I don't believe in black magic, but I believe that they believe in it. I believe that they do rituals, that they believe that they're invoking things, and they live their lives in accordance with this crazy shit. And this is the essence of evil. It's evil is not like some foreign entity outside of humans. Humans are the cause of evil because we have free will, but at the same time, we can we create stories for ourselves, and when we lie to ourselves too much and we create a false fantasy of reality, and we start living into that, we crush the good. We crush what made us good when we were babies. And the oligarchy has created like sort of an artistic science over the course of thousands of years at enhancing the indoctrination of an elite into their governing class, who will then carry out crazy shit that will ultimately destroy them at the end of the day, as well as many victims. And some of them wake up. Like some people realize at a certain point, hey, I've lived in a shadowland. I thought I was benefiting from this, and you see examples now and again of people who make the identity shift, as we see, I think, with many of the elites within Saudi Arabia, who recognized that they were not as essential as they thought they were, as they were promised to be, and they were ultimately a lot more disposable in the Great Reset that was planned for them. And so we saw a purge of Prince Bandar bin Sultan, right, who got purged from Saudi intelligence, who oversaw, with George Bush and Dick Cheney, the operation in 9/11. He got purged. Prince Faisal and a variety of other associates of Prince Bandar, who were formerly operating and controlling most of Saudi military and security policy, were purged. So we're seeing now an orientation where a sane faction within Saudi Arabia shook off the crazy and are now recognizing that the only future is with the multipolar alliance and building high-speed rail across Saudi Arabia, working to try to help stabilize Africa. But then you've got another faction too, that the oligarchy of the West thinks that they could bring back out again, bring back the insanity, and coax them back into the old script of the New World Order. So they're desperately trying to hang on to their script, and it's all about scripts and narratives, but not reality. I'm gonna have about 5 minutes because I just realized that my guest from out of town arrived an hour earlier, so I got 5 minutes.
That's cool. No,
All right.
Listen, we'll cancel. We'll stop it here, and then we'll come back on a later date, and we'll let you rock, shake, rattle, and roll, man. I mean, because this has been a pleasure for you. Know how I feel about it, so I would love to have you back on the show soon. And I understand because I have somebody knocking at my door as we speak right now. So,
Cool.
man, thank you so much. I contacted those who you told me to contact. One has gotten back with me, and I'm waiting for Joquez. How do you pronounce his name?
Joaquin Flores is fantastic. You guys will hit it off.
Flores.
And somebody asked in the chat there, what's Joaquin's Telegram channel? It's t.me/New Resistance, one word. And if you do that, follow Joaquin's channel. It's a great channel. I do it every day. It's fantastic.
Thank you so much, Matthew. Be blessed, man, and I'll talk to you all. I'll hit you up later on, man.
Absolutely. All right. Till the next one. Ciao.
Everybody. All right, everybody. Listen. Don't hang up. Don't click off. Don't do anything. We'll have. He referred to guests. Joaquin is one that'll be on the show hopefully soon, and we have another one that was in government that's supposed to be on the show soon. And I think Scott Ritter will be back with us next week, if I'm not mistaken, and we're waiting for another major guest to yay or nay the show. So we're working hard to try to get you guys these guests, and because we're not in this circle of cronies that pass guests from one to another on the major channels, sometimes we get left out the loop. But me and Real Truth Talk, we're working hard. He's working hard to get him on his channel. I'm trying to get him on my channel, and we're going to try to keep bringing you the truth, regardless to whom or what. Again, hit the like button, subscribe. Hit the like button, subscribe, and share. Listen, we'll have another stream tomorrow. We will be streaming tomorrow, unless everything goes wrong or I'm late getting back. But we'll have a show tomorrow. I haven't set it up yet, but we will. I see on my screen Rumble has been blocked and Odyssey has been blocked from the live stream today, but we'll try to upload this over there. Go and subscribe to all of the platforms related to the Red Pill Diaries. On that note, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for giving me your time, because I know time is the most precious commodity that you can give, because once your time is gone, you can never get it back. It is a non-renewable resource and asset. So when you spend your time, make sure you get an equal or greater return for spending your time. That's why it's called spending time. Know that I love you, but know this, that the true and living God, he will always love you better. Until we next speak again, stay strong, stay true, but above all things, stay righteous, because righteousness is the only thing that is going to make you see your way out of this madness and help you to persevere through all of the tribulations and trying times that are ahead of us. I love you all. Hey, mama, your baby boy loves you more than life. Don't you ever, ever forget it. Deuces, everyone.